Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa for your daily news from across the continent. I'm Jean-Emile Jamin. Coming up on the show, as France honors its military on Bastille Day, one Burkinabe man highlights the plight of African army veterans promised a pension by France, but yet to receive their money. Then Senegal's main opposition party declares Ousmane Sonko as its presidential candidate, despite questions about his eligibility following a jail sentence. And ahead of the Francophone Games in Kinshasa, the final preparations are underway, though concerns remain over substandard facilities and insecurity. Thanks for joining us here on France 24. Well, as France celebrates its National Day, others are feeling not so festive. In the colonial era, African soldiers known as Senegalese tirailleurs fought side by side with the French. But many years later, many of these African veterans are still waiting for their pensions, despite promises by France. Enter Warren Sare, a Burkinabe photographer whose Niamey exhibition aims to expose their plight.
World War II, the Indochina War and the Algerian War all have African veterans who are forced into service by France under its colonial rule. Burkinabe photographer Warren Sare travels across West Africa to uncover the stories of these former soldiers. Many of them never received their promised financial compensation from France.
There are many of them, but as I mentioned, the main reason behind this is that their own countries, they have not been taken care of. They are Senegalese, Burkinabe, Malians, Nigerians. It is primarily up to us, the sons, grandsons, and especially those who hold positions of power in these countries. It is up to us first to figure out what we can do for our parents.
More than 50,000 Africans forcefully recruited by the French army lost their lives during the two world wars. 93-year-old Danlé Boncano fought in both Indochina and Algeria. He claims to have served for 12 years in the French army, yet only 9 are officially acknowledged. He says that since 2008 he hasn't received a single penny for his commitment to France.
My first complaint is that after being well regarded, I find myself rejected. I've seen lower-ranked soldiers receiving pensions, while I do not. Yet I am married and a father.
In early 2023, the French Ministry of Solidarities announced that African veterans, collectively known as the Senegalese tirailleurs, would receive the minimum pension regardless of what country they lived in. Previously, they had to live in France for at least 6 months per year to qualify.
However, younger generations of Africans are gaining recognition. For the very first time, students as young as 16 from 6 military academies in Africa took part in the Bastille Day parade on the Champs-Élysées in Paris.
We have formed a brotherhood in the last 3 years. It will last over time. In future missions in other countries, we might meet again. Our brotherhood will help us strengthen our links and work together with our French comrades.
It's a real opportunity for us because we are discovering other cultures and ways of working. So we are really happy to be with our comrades, and we have made friendships that will last forever. It's always good to have friends around the world. It opens our eyes and we are really happy.
Earlier this week, Senegalese opposition leader Ousmane Sonko was officially named as his party's candidate for the 2024 presidential election. But Mr. Sonko is effectively under house arrest and technically barred from taking part in next year's race. Despite this, his party is calling for a huge rally on Saturday to mark his candidacy, a gathering which government has outlawed. Sam Bradpiece brings us the latest.
June was the deadliest month in the history of independent Senegal, with supporters of the main opposition leader Ousmane Sonko clashing with security forces in prolonged cycles of violent protest and brutal repression. On Saturday, Mr. Sonko's party has called for followers to gather en masse to show their support for the opposition leader. The city authorities, though, have not authorised this gathering, which is set to take place in the Dakar suburb of Guédiawaye, meaning that security forces will likely crack down hard. Now, Mr. Sonko himself has been found guilty by a Dakar court of inappropriate sexual relations with a younger woman, which means he's technically illegible from taking part in the 2024 presidential election. But he has been selected as his party's candidate to lead them in that race. Mr. Sonko's supporters and Mr. Sonko himself have maintained that the charges against him and the judgment against him are politically motivated. Mr. Sonko will address the nation and his followers in a live stream on Friday night, and the tone of his speech will likely give a clearer idea of just how things will go down over the weekend.
Time for some more news from across the continent. Kenyan President William Ruto says opposition protests planned for next week will not be allowed after demonstrations left at least 15 people dead. Opposition leader Raila Odinga's party had earlier called for 3 more days of protests from Wednesday against tax hikes that Ruto signed into law last month. Then 2 opponents of Tunisian President Kais Saied have been freed after spending more than 5 months in jail. But concerns remain about fellow activists still behind bars, with rights groups condemning what they call a witch hunt and power coup by Saied aimed at repressing free speech. And according to his spokesperson, South Africa's former president Jacob Zuma is receiving medical treatment in Russia. It comes as the country's constitutional court has upheld a ruling that Zuma should return to prison for contempt of court. Zuma's return to custody is yet to be determined. The Ghanaian government denies allegations of forcibly displacing Burkinabe refugees, stating that it is conducting security screenings among the 2,000 displaced people in Ghana. And that's due to instability in Burkina Faso. Many Burkinabe residents have sought refuge in Ghana's northeastern region.
Ghana is currently hosting more than 8,000 Burkinabés who are fleeing the terrorist insurgency currently ongoing in the French country. Earlier this week, media reports showed viral videos of what has been described as a targeted operation led by the Ghana Armed Forces and the Ghana Immigration Service that was supposedly forcing vulnerable Burkinabe refugees out of the country back into the country where they have been running away from. The UN Refugee Agency described the process as a violation of the human rights of these people. But today, the Ghana Refugee Board, which is the government agency that has been managing these refugee camps in northern Ghana, has come out to say that this cannot be true and that the government of Ghana was committed to receiving even more refugees who did want to leave Burkina Faso.
The asylum seekers who have indicated their intention to seek asylum, who have availed themselves to the protection of the state of Ghana. None of those people have been returned. But we are all aware of the situation in Burkina Faso. We know initially started as a humanitarian situation, a refugee situation, and progressively, somehow, it has deteriorated into the situation that has caused the Burkinabe nationals themselves to start fleeing. So clearly, any mass movement brings along risks.
Ghana's military has said it only expels illegal immigrants and people suspected of being terrorists.
About 100 opposition protesters took to the streets of the Central African Republic on Friday, denouncing the upcoming constitutional referendum. The protest took place despite a ban on gatherings by President Faustin-Archange Touadéra's administration.
Our democracy is on the verge of chaos. That's why we have decided to protest, to show to our country and the world that there are some people in Central African Republic who think for themselves.
Well, close by, the DRC's capital, Kinshasa, is abuzz with excitement. With less than 2 weeks to go until the 9th edition of the Francophone Games, athletes from across the French-speaking world are set to participate, but concerns are growing over substandard facilities and insecurity, which have led some countries to announce that they will field much reduced teams. Take a listen to this report.
Here in the heart of Kinshasa, the countdown has begun. but there's still a ways to go. The Francophone Games open in less than 2 weeks, and though 2 sports halls have been built, there is still a lot of work to be done. Despite the challenge, organisers are confident they can make it work.
The building is almost finished, it's just getting cleaned up. Basketball training sessions and table tennis competitions will be held here.
Outside, workers are bustling around. Inside, surfaces are being wiped down one last time, before it's go time.
Let's go!
Athletes from neighbouring Angola and Congo-Brazzaville have already arrived for the first judo competition.
This is just practice.
Are the teams ready?
Everything's impeccable.
Training is taken very seriously.
Warm up.
Coaches give their final words of advice before the fight, which will take place on brand new tatami mats.
This venue is good. I know that in Africa we can be a bit behind. Our infrastructure isn't up to date, but this is good.
The question of infrastructure lies at the heart of the controversy that is plaguing the Games. DR Congo has come in for some criticism over the standard of the sports facilities for the Games. Levels of crime in the capital have also prompted some countries, such as France, to send scaled-back teams to the Games. Canada has cancelled its participation altogether. It's a major blow, but DR Congo insists that it's up to the job of hosting a major international competition.
This is a big moment, and all French-speaking countries should attend, as they do when the Games are held elsewhere, to show their solidarity with the Congolese people. Arrangements have been made to ensure the health and safety of all at the event.
More than 3,000 young athletes and artists from around 40 countries are expected in Kinshasa for the start of the 9th edition of the Francophone Games.
And finally, we end the show with a nod to tennis star Ons Jabeur, the Tunisian seeking to make history on Saturday as the first African or Arab woman to win a Grand Slam singles title at Wimbledon. We can't wait for the action here at France 24. Well, that's all the news from across Africa this evening, but there's more coming up on France 24.